There's a door in your house you can close. Behind it, nobody watches you. Nobody judges your face when you're not performing for anyone. Nobody hears what you mutter to yourself when something goes wrong. You can cry there, or laugh at something stupid, or just sit and stare at nothing. And not one other human being on earth has to know it happened. That door is doing more work than you probably ever think about. And for almost the entire span of human history, that door simply didn't exist. Not because nobody had thought of doors eventually, because for a staggeringly long stretch of time, nobody had anywhere private enough to put one. Picture a Yanomami Shabono, a communal structure still built today in parts of the Amazon and studied for years by the anthropologist Napoleon Chagnon. It's not a village of separate houses. It's one continuous roofed ring, sometimes 90 meters across, wrapped entirely around an open central plaza where disputes get settled and rituals happen in full view of everyone. Families sling their hammocks along the inside edge, each with a small hearth fire, and that's it. That's the whole boundary between one family and the next. A few feet of open air and the smoke from a cook fire. No walls between households. No door anywhere on any structure for anyone. Every argument, every laugh, every private moment of grief plays out in front of 50 to 400 people who can all see it happening in real time, simply because there's nowhere else for it to happen instead. Now, stretch that picture backward across roughly the last few 100,000 years. Most of human history was lived in small, mobile bands, sleeping close together around a handful of fires, moving as one unit through open or lightly covered landscapes. There was no architecture built for solitude. If you wanted to be somewhere no one could see you, your options were basically the tree line or nothing. Which raises an obvious question. If a species is smart enough to invent fire, tools, language, and eventually farming, why did it take so unbelievably long to invent something as simple as a wall with a door in it? The anthropologist Christopher Boehm spent decades studying that exact kind of society, and his answer flips the whole question around. He argued that being constantly visible wasn't a failure to invent privacy. It was doing a job. Boehm described what he called reverse dominance hierarchies, a kind of built-in political system where the group actively watches for anyone starting to act like a boss, anyone hoarding meat, bullying weaker members, or pushing their way into too much power. And the tool the group used to stop that, again and again across dozens of documented societies, was social visibility, gossip, public ridicule, everyone simply seeing what everyone else was doing all the time, with nowhere to hide it. Think about what that actually requires. To plan a betrayal, to quietly build up your own private advantage while pretending to cooperate, to become the kind of person who takes more than their share, you generally need somewhere private to plan it. Take away every private space, and you take away the staging ground for exactly that kind of behavior. A group with no privacy isn't a group that failed to build walls. It's a group that built itself into one continuous, self-policing surface, where cruelty and ambition had nowhere left to hide and grow in the dark. The anthropologist Richard Lee saw this mechanism in action firsthand, decades before Boehm wrote about the theory behind it. Living among the Kungsayan in the Kalahari, Lee once brought an enormous ox to share as a Christmas gift, expecting real gratitude in return. Instead, the group mocked it loudly, calling it a bag of bones barely worth the trouble of butchering, even as everyone could see perfectly well how much meat it actually was. Confused and a little hurt, Lee eventually learned the insult wasn't really about the ox at all. The Kung had a name for the custom, insulting the meat, and they aimed it at every successful hunter without exception. A man who brought in a huge kill and got showered with praise for it would sooner or later start believing his own hype, start expecting deference, start acting like he mattered more than everyone around him. Publicly deflating him first made that outcome almost impossible. There was no private conversation where a hunter could quietly enjoy his own status. Whatever pride he felt happened out loud, in front of the entire group, and the group made sure it never got the chance to calcify into something dangerous. That same total visibility shows up somewhere even more intimate, too. The anthropologist Barry Hewlett spent years living among and studying the Akas, a hunter-gatherer community in the Congo Basin, and documented something striking about how their infants were raised. aka fathers held their babies for close to half of every daylight hour spent in camp, one of the highest rates of direct paternal-infant contact ever recorded anywhere, not occasional affection, near constant physical closeness, woven directly into the rhythm of daily life, with essentially zero expectation that a baby would ever be alone, unheld, or unwatched. From a modern angle, that can sound almost suffocating. No time truly alone, ever, from infancy onward. But flip the framing the way Hewlett's research invites you to. In a world with real predators, real accidental injury, real and immediate danger at every turn, being constantly seen wasn't a loss of freedom. It was the single most effective survival system available. A baby who was never out of someone's hands was a baby who was never unprotected either. What looks like an absence of privacy from where you're sitting now was actually a presence, a wall of watching eyes standing permanently between a vulnerable child and the world trying to kill it. So is privacy simply completely absent the whole way through until modern walls finally arrived? That's the tidy version of the story, and it turns out to be at least partly wrong. The anthropologist David Graeber and the archaeologist David Wengrow spent years challenging exactly this kind of flattened, single storyline account of the deep past. Looking across the archaeological and ethnographic record together, they argued that ancient and traditional societies were nowhere near as uniform as the standard narrative claims, and that includes how people handled space and solitude. Some groups really did live in that fully open, fully visible way. Everyone's business permanently, everyone else's. Others in different regions at different times quietly carved out more separation than the simple story allows. More individual space, more seasonal variation, entire stretches of the year spent in smaller, more private family units before regrouping into the large, watched-over camps again. The real pattern wasn't one long, unbroken era of zero privacy followed by a sudden modern invention of it, arriving all at once with the first locked door. It was something messier, something closer to constant experimentation, different groups landing on different answers to the same underlying question of exactly how much of yourself a person was required to show at any given point in their life. Which makes the door in your house look a little different now. It isn't some obvious, inevitable upgrade. Humanity was simply too primitive to think of earlier, sitting there waiting the whole time for someone clever enough to invent a hinge. For most of the time humans have existed, that door would have quietly removed you from the one system holding the whole group together, the constant mutual watching that kept ambition in check, kept a good hunter humble, and kept the smallest and most vulnerable people fed, held, and safe. Losing your privacy wasn't a hardship imposed on ancient humans, something they endured until technology finally rescued them from it. In a very real sense, having none of it and being seen every single hour of every single day is closer to the actual ordinary condition being human evolved inside of in the first place. So the next time you close that door behind you, it's worth noticing what you're actually doing. You're stepping just briefly out of the oldest social contract our species ever ran on, the one where everyone saw everyone all the time, and nobody got to quietly become someone worse when they thought no one was looking. The version of you that gets to disappear behind a closed door, unwatched and unaccountable to anyone, is the strange, recent arrival here, not the other way around.